Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. This week, the topic is Hold It Against Your Bones. And that is a line from a Mary Oliver poem that I will read to you later. There's so many things happening in the world yet again in our news cycle that are devastating and heartbreaking. And I'm thinking of course, Amber Thurman and her 6-year-old son who now has to grow up without her, and so many other things that are just so devastating for women and girls across the country and in the world. And, you know, Diddy, and then, I mean, there's never a week that goes by right now where you're just not faced with some devastating story of violence against women. And it is painful, painful just to be taking this in all the time. I wanted to pause this week because I have my own sort of major transition going on right now, and it's also part of being a woman, in my case, being a mother. My son is going to college, and he's my firstborn. This is my first one going. And actually, I'm recording the podcast early because I will be helping him get his dorm room set up at the time that I would normally be recording the podcast. And it's such an emotional time. And those of you who have children or stepchildren or children, that you love and care for, if you've been through this, then you know what this is. And I have friends whose children have already gone away to school. I know it's all going to be totally fine. I'm not confused. But it is emotional. And, there is something about the age where I'm 53, and the last few years of my life, really, it's just been about loss so much, and loss in this way that I don't think we talk about enough. And that's really what I wanted to get into today, is just at the end of 2021 in December, I lost my mom, and she was suddenly diagnosed with ALS, really out of left field, in the spring of 2020. And she did not want to accept that diagnosis for quite a while, but it became apparent, after not very long, that was the diagnosis, and that was what we were dealing with and what she was facing. And for anyone who doesn't know what it's a Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a motor neuron degenerative disease that just takes everything from you. And in my mother's case, it affected her throat first, so she started to have a difficult time speaking, enunciating. And then it was hard for her to swallow. She couldn't eat, she couldn't drink, she needed a feeding tube, and it just little by little, she couldn't speak. And it just takes everything from you. And as of now, there is no cure. So it's a very painful way to lose someone you love. And my mother and I struggled for, most of my life together. We had a tough time, and I've talked about it and written about it. And I'm actually writing a whole memoir about it because I feel there's such a rage that comes along with growing up as a girl, becoming a woman in a culture that is a patriarchy and is constantly telling you what your worth is and what your value is. And again, just kind of going back to just all the violence against girls and women. And I wrote about a lot of that last week in my essay, Moving Violations. And that actually led to one of the most unbelievable conversations in the comment section. So I was, of course, going to kind of continue talking about that and writing about it, and I will. But I am also honoring just that part of being a woman of this time in my life, and talking about all of the sort of upheaval that happens and the loss that happens that you might not see coming, and that sandwich generation, conversation. And for me, like, I'd heard that term sandwich generation, but I didn't really pay attention. I think I didn't do sort of a deep dive into what that was until I was in it. Until I was eating it. And really what it is like that moment in time where you have aging parents and you have teenage children, and you're kind of like in the middle, and you're being pulled in all these different directions. And somehow also, you're supposed to be able to continue doing all the things that you need to do, whether that's your creative life, your work life, whatever, whatever those things are. And it's just a lot. And the experience of when I had my children, I got divorced when my daughter was 18 months old, my son was 4. And I did the single mom thing for, most of their childhoods. And I owned a business at the same time. I had a brick and mortar yoga studio in downtown Santa Monica called Yogis Anonymous, and an online website called yogisanonymous.com, which I still have, which is still thriving. And so it was a lot, sort of doing the full-time, mom thing, and also working, teaching a full schedule, and writing after my kids would go to sleep at night, and really not getting a lot of sleep. But it was one of the most, when I look back on it, I just have so much nostalgia. The kids were tiny, and we were just together all the time. And I was aware even then, in that state of exhaustion, that it was a season that, and my mom used to say, and a lot of people, this is saying, but, the days are long and the years are short. And that is certainly the case when you have small children. It can be so, you're constantly being pulled and trying to, when they're tiny like that, keep them alive, make sure they're safe, make sure they feel loved and secure and happy, and whatever it is that's sort of like interesting to them, you want to give them more of that and cultivate that curiosity and that joy. And so that has been, for the last 18 years, my children have been the main focus of my days, and the main, that's where I put my time, my energy, my love, my attention is on them first, and then everything else has to come after that, around that, underneath that, on top of that, however it is, right? However you can do it. And when I wrote Yoga's Healing Power, Looking Inward for Change, Growth, and Peace, there were a lot of people who I did interviews, as you do when a book comes out, and there were people asking me like about balance. How do you find the balance? And it's like, you don't find any balance. You're just doing the best that you can, especially if you're doing it as, a single mom and your kids are little and you are running a business and trying to write. And I used to just throw my yoga mat down in the middle of the playroom and just, do my best to breathe and calm my nervous system and get a little bit of time in to take care of myself. So it's not about balance, it's about choices, really. And like sometimes you're making difficult choices. You can't maybe do everything every day to please everyone. And if you struggle with the ability to say no, sometimes that's very hard. And that used to be an issue for me. It's hard for me to say no. If somebody asked me to do something, my inclination, even now, is to say yes, but it's gotten easier and easier over the years. It's not hard for me to say no anymore. But that was a learning curve. It was a process of me understanding, in order to say yes to the things that are the most important to me, I'm going to have to say no to some things. I can't do everything. And you're never going to make everyone happy all the time. But there's a lot of pressure. I think that even like in motherhood, and the way even women are judging each other really harshly, or like the way that you're doing things comes under scrutiny. And I did a lot of baby wearing and attachment. My kids were like on me all the time, and that was easier for me and felt more natural to me and just worked better with my life and our lives. But I would never, it's like everyone's got to figure it out in the best way they can. And there are no manuals. If your children feel loved and secure, you're doing it. And it starts even before that. Like I remember when I got pregnant with my son, and again, I'm a writer and I'm a yoga teacher and I live in Southern California. And what happens if you are a yoga teacher living in Southern California when you get pregnant is people start sending you videos of like women giving birth, at the edge of the shore with like dolphins frolicking in the background, and the woman squats down and has the baby and lifts it to her breast and starts breastfeeding. It's all beautiful. And that's what starts to happen. You're inundated with people like, oh, are you going to do it at home? Or are you going to do it in a tub? Or are you going to what are you doing? And I felt a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, it was also my desire to not have any interventions. Like I didn't want any drugs. I wanted low lights. I wanted, music playing. I wanted to be able to do yoga. I had all these ideas about things. And as it turned out, my birth went nothing like my birth plan. Nothing at all. I mean, I'd had everyone sign off on my birth plan that I wrote out, my doctor, the nurses at the hospital, the ad, everyone. And I think it's beautiful to have a birth plan. I think it's beautiful to have a vision of how you hope things are going to go. And I also think it's really important to understand it might not go according to your plan, and that, there are certain things like that are not, it's almost like you're writing a plan for the tides of the ocean. It's, there's like, it's whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and it's not all up to you. And so that was kind of my first lesson in letting go. And this really, it couldn't have been more intense. And I don't like to really talk about it too much, especially in a public sphere, in case there's someone pregnant listening. So many people have a birth plan, they have a vision, and it goes beautifully. And so, that's what I hope, and that's what I want for everyone. Mine didn't, and without going into tremendous detail, it was very precarious for both me and for my son for like the last 12 hours of a 24-hour labor. To the point that there was like a respiratory team in the room. There was a lot of alarms going off. And it's just nothing went according to my plan. And yet we're both here. I didn't know. There was a long stretch of time that felt endless as I was going through it, where I really didn't know if we were going to make it. Either one of us, both of us. And at a certain point, my prayer became, please just let us go together, whichever way we're going. I could not bear the idea of him being without me, or me being without him. So thankfully, we're both here. But it taught me, I think, in those several hours of kind of going back and forth across the veil, that's how it felt, how fragile it is. And I think that we do tend to think of life as this very sort of solid, vibrant, we're alive, we're walking, there's gravity, we're on the earth, we're moving from place to place, we have a plan for the day, we have a plan for the week, we if you go to yoga, you probably have a place where you put your mat down. Maybe you do your grocery shopping on the same day every week and you like this particular peanut butter, and if they don't have it, it's deeply upsetting. We like to pin things down and know what's coming and feel like we have some control over our destiny. And the truth is, and I think we all know this, even if we don't like to consciously bring it into our awareness, anything can change, like in an instant. On just a regular Tuesday with no warning, just everything can change. And all of your plans can go right out the window. And I think that it would be healthy for us to integrate that a little bit more into our daily awareness, because not to the degree that it terrifies you and you can't, do anything, but to the degree that it inspires you not to waste time and not to take anything for granted. And I think because I had such a difficult time, we had such a difficult time, I did have to work on that. When I brought my son home from the hospital, I really had to work on having more faith that everything was okay, he was okay, we were everything was going to be okay, than fear. And so it took time and it took effort. I had to consciously direct my thoughts to, just good things, just seeing he's healthy, we're good, everything is okay, just to really train my mind on just a beautiful experience. And I had to do that when I had my daughter as well. I had a much easier birth with her. It was just easy and, just much less. We had one dramatic moment very early and then we were good. So, but even with her, I think what happens is the love is so intense that you can't help but feel your vulnerability. You can't help it. And it is humbling, to say the least. And so I find myself at this moment where my children, who have been the main focus of my life for 18 years, they're older now. My son is going to be 18 in November and my daughter is 15, and they still need me, but they need me in a different way and to a, much different degree. It's not this full immersion, chubby arms around your neck all the time, somebody hanging off your hip, it's not like that, anymore. My son's towering over me and my daughter's at my same height, and you're just in a different phase of things. And now we're at yet another different phase where I'm going to take him to college this weekend and set up this room where he's going to be living for the next, obviously he'll be back for breaks and all that stuff, and he'll be back over summer. This is not this is still his home and all that. His room is here for him, but it's still a different phase that we're entering, a different chapter. And it is tender and, it's emotional. And you can know something is going to be fine and that it's the natural order of things and still feel grief and, mourning and the loss of how it's been, which has been so beautiful and wonderful. And what's coming, I have no doubt, is going to be beautiful and wonderful. And I was writing in the essay, it's I wouldn't want him to live at home forever. I don't think that would be good for him. And we would drive each other crazy at a certain point. And I was saying in the essay, I'm very well aware I drive him crazy now sometimes, and vice versa. So, it's good that he's going out into the world, but it's also, it's painful. It's good, but it's also bittersweet, right? It's you want this for your kid. You want them to go out and get, start to, and I feel so thankful that he has the next 4 years to be in that space where he's getting used to being on his own and making decisions for himself and, learning how to manage his time and figuring out what he needs to focus on in order to get things done with a safety net. That's an ideal scenario that not everybody gets to experience. So I'm really grateful that he is about to have this opportunity, and I want him to go out into the world and build a life that feels good to him, and that feels inspiring and joyful. I want that. And I can still feel all the sort of like mom feelings of like, wow, I can't believe this. I can't believe this moment is upon us. And so that's where I am. And I think because I've lost both of my parents in the last few years, there's understanding, there's understanding things conceptually, and there's living through experiences. And that lived experience is always going to be more, it's just going to be deeper than reading something and it resonates with you. And so this whole idea of letting go has been something I've been practicing yoga for over 30 years. I've been teaching, I've lost track of how many years it is, but it's close to 30. And letting go is just a huge part of the philosophy, this whole idea of like, you're not in control of most things. You are certainly not in control of the events that are going to happen around you, the way things are going to go, the way a relationship is going to unfold, what other people need, want, feel, think. Like, you're not in control of that. You're not in control of the way someone else drives on the freeway or allows you to merge or doesn't, or cuts you off, or like none of those things are up to you, let alone like the major things that happen in a life. But what you can work on is how you respond, and using the like just very lighthearted example of someone cutting you off in traffic. I mean, you can either say to yourself, that person is driving that way like all day long, and you can watch them do it. They'll continue to cut people off in front of you. Or you can, your blood pressure can go through the roof, and you can like unroll your window and throw your traffic finger up in the air. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, there's a lot, that's what you get to work on, is like, how am I going to respond to the things that happen? And some of the things that happen are, they're devastating. They're heartbreaking. And certainly losing my mother was one of those. And we had struggled, like I said, for really most of my life together because of her alcoholism, but also because of her rage. She had a lot of rage that I understand, I think, differently now, certainly than I did even like 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. I don't think I understood where that rage was coming from for a long time. And I think that part of it was specific to our situation. I think that she unconsciously or consciously blamed me for the end of her marriage to my dad. And I have a lot of reason to think that that's the case, both things she said to me and things I understood after she passed. But I also think she had that rage of being a woman in a world where you can't protect your daughter. There's nothing you can do once your daughter heads out into the world. And I'm in that. I have a 15-year-old, I'm in a different phase with her where I can't be with her every minute of the day, nor would she want me to be. She wants to be out in the world with her friends, and she should be able to do that and be safe, but that's not the world we live in. And it's difficult. It is enraging. It is devastating to understand that, because you've been through your own experiences as a woman. And I wrote about a lot of those, as I said in last week's essay in Moving Violation. I wrote about a lot of my experiences, and that informs the way that I understand the world that she's heading out into. I know what happened to me, and I know that it is different for her already. By the time I was her age, I'd already had so many experiences of violence and, assault in different ways. It had already affected my worldview, and thankfully, I've been around. I've been able to arrange my life so that I've been there after school. I've been there to, like drive to wherever it is we need to be and wait. And, I've managed to, I'm very lucky that I have the kind of life and the kind of work that I do, that I can arrange things around my children's needs. And I've been able to do that for as long as I've had them. So that I'm so fortunate. Not everyone is in that situation. And, but it is so difficult. So I have a different understanding of, I think, some of my mother's rage and some of her, even though it was misdirected, a lot of the time she directed it at me. I think that some of it was her fury over the world that we live in and the way that things are, and her inability to save me from it, even though that's not the way it came out. That's what I've come to think. When I lost her, at the end of her life, when she got ALS, it was during the pandemic, and she ended up in the ICU. And I won't talk about this for too long, but I ended up basically being with her in the ICU for the last month of her life. I would fly home, for a night, just like look at my kids, make sure everybody was okay, and then I'd go back. And I'd be in the ICU with her for like 12 hours a day. And there wasn't even a thought, there wasn't any way I could not be there. She was not okay. She was, bones in a bed at that point, and she needed me. She needed me to advocate for her and to be there. And I did. And it was so interesting because she couldn't speak anymore. And I mean, she hadn't been able to drink for months, but she couldn't, and that's the first time since I was maybe like 7 or 8, that my mom was sober for like an extended period of time. And she couldn't speak, but we started communicating for the first time in like decades. Maybe there was an actual loving, open communication happening, and so much healing. And I'm really grateful for that. I don't know, as hard as it was and has been and still is, like that first year after she passed was just, I don't know, just like a tsunami of grief, and really, really difficult to get through. But it would have been, I think, even worse if we had not had that healing that occurred in the last like 3 weeks of her life, really. And any and every way I had felt hurt or disappointed or let down or betrayed or, devastated by her, I just let it all go at the end. I just let it go because it didn't matter anymore. And with us, it was never that I always loved my mother. Like, I loved her so much, and she was such a force in my life. It was that I had to have boundaries all the time because she would lash out at me. She would drink. She would, when I was growing up, she was violent. It wasn't pretty. But I loved her. Like that wasn't the problem. And I think at the end of her life, she finally realized, because, people don't do that. They don't sort of fly back and forth to LA for the night to like look at and then turn around and come back and, sitting and just be in an ICU. I wasn't even sitting. I was like talking to doctors, talking to nurses, talking to the palliative care team at the end, and just doing all the things. You don't do that unless you wildly love someone, and I was doing them without even, it wasn't even a choice. It was just what I was going to do. And I won't talk about the last, few hours of her life, but I was there. And I had the first panic attack of my life the day after, because I just couldn't understand where she was. I couldn't understand where she was. So I went through that experience, and it's very unmooring. It's like you feel untethered, you're just kind of like, I don't know how I can be on a planet where my mother doesn't exist, doesn't walk on this planet anymore. I don't know. My brain couldn't understand for a time. And then my dad a few months later, I mean, a whole bunch of things happened. My half sister passed away. She had been looking after him. He was in an assisted living facility near her in Georgia, and she had a stroke and she did not make it. And I had to move my dad to California, and I became his primary caregiver for the last year of his life. And we had a very, my dad was, I don't, whatever. My dad it wasn't easy. He was married 4 times. He like hurt everyone, every woman in his life, certainly, all 3 of his children, certainly. But I think he was a good uncle. He was an artist. He was an interesting person, open-minded, but definitely on the narcissism scale, probably toward the high end. But then I was taking care of him, and that was hard because I had done a lot of that when I was a child. And then he passed in July of 23. And so I went through that, and I, of course, also had teenagers and the pandemic and Zoom school and all these things happening at once, and just a lot of loss at once. And perimenopause, because that of course that happens like right as all these other things are happening, and I'm still dealing with that. And so it's just a time in your life where all your careful plans would probably go out the window, because with my parents, I did not see it coming. And I had a life happening where I was already running a business and writing and children and all those things. And then suddenly you're like, oh, okay, wait, my parents are not okay. What am I going to do about that? And it was a very different experience with my mom and my dad. With my dad, I had to really wrestle with my feelings of what do I owe this person who was pretty awful to me, whether he meant to be or not. It was, he was not a good introduction into the world of men, and he just robbed me of any chance of having sort of just like a normal, innocent, joyful childhood like that. He didn't allow for that to happen, because he was like laying all of his grown-up problems on me all the time and crying and taking me on dates with him and lying to my stepmom in front of me. It was just a lot of, it was not good. But ultimately I realized it's not so much about what I owe him. It's who do I want to be, and how do I want him to go out here, and I kind of, for me, came to the conclusion, I feel like everyone deserves dignity at the end of their lives, and care, somebody there to make sure that they're okay, that they're safe. And so that's what I did, that's who I decided I wanted to be. It didn't really have anything to do with him or how he had behaved. It was really about how am I going to feel about what I do or don't do. And I didn't allow him to mistreat me or berate me or, yell at me, or when he lost his patience or his temper, I would just say, I'm not coming today. I'm not going to have you speak to me like that. I'm working too hard to make sure your life is okay. So, it's just a lot of that kind of thing. But when he went, it was like this really strange feeling of being orphaned. And, again, I'm a grown woman. So it's strange. For me, it caught me off guard that I felt that way, because it's like, orphaned, really? Is that really how I'm feeling? And it kind of was. And my stepdad is still here and kicking and all that. And I'm engaged with just making sure that he's okay and has everything he needs and is, happy and all of that. So it's a time in life where there's just a lot that is asked of you with kind of no warning, unless you're paying attention to people like me when you're, 35, long before it's going to happen to you or likely to happen to you. I mean, obviously anything can happen to anyone at any time, but I wasn't listening to these sandwich generation conversations until I was in it. And I think in a way it really has helped me, as painful as it is. It's just helped me live through the loss and understand that, like with everything in life, there's 2 ways you can go. You can grip and, hold on for dear life and fight against what's happening, or you can open your hands and open your heart and open your mind and let it flow, and that when you're able to do that, it's a better ride, and it's better for everyone around you. And loving people that way, loving people as they are instead of as you wish they would be. So many people are in relationships and it's like, this could be great if only, and if you actually like finish the sentence, it's if only this was a totally different person I was with, like people are hoping their partners are suddenly going to have a personality change. Like, it doesn't happen, and so I think ideally to walk into any relationships that we're heading into, whether they're friendships or romantic relationships or our familial relationships or any job or any, creative endeavor or any situation at all, with just curiosity. To me, this is like a quality that people don't talk about enough, because if you can be curious, you're not attached, you don't have an expectation, you're just like walking into a situation and seeing how it's going to be, how you're going to feel, what's going to happen. And I think part of cultivating curiosity is also cultivating self-trust. Because I know if I walk into a situation and it doesn't feel okay, I know myself at this point, I know I'm going to remove myself from the situation, So it's easier now because I can just walk into a space and just openly and like see what happens and know that I have my own back. I didn't know that for a long time, and that wasn't the case for a long time. So that does help, for sure. But you do, as you get older, you realize like your time is finite, so is your energy, and you really want to be mindful about that. Like, where am I spending my time and energy, and on what? What am I giving importance to, and is it important? And for me, always it comes down to the people I love, and I always want the people I love to know, like I love them, which means I accept them. That doesn't mean that if you love someone and they're doing things that are self-destructive, like of course you want to hold up a mirror and be like, hey, I love you, and I'm seeing what you're doing here, and I'm so heartbroken that this is the way that you're treating yourself or feeling about yourself, but I know I can't fix it for you. Like, me telling you how amazing you are isn't going to fix it if you don't feel that way, but I love you and I'm here, and like I will sit with you. I will do anything I can to help you. I'll like, I always tell people who find a lot of relief and comfort and ease from going to yoga, like, you can buy someone a yoga mat. You can do that, but you can't like force someone. And I'm not a zealot. I don't think that's like the only way. I just think that's a way. It certainly was a huge part of my healing experience, and it's why I teach, but I don't think it's the only way. And but you can't manage other people's reactions or feelings or needs. Like, you kind of have to let people be. And sometimes that means you're going to love people who are struggling. It's really difficult, just like it's really difficult to love your kid with your whole entire heart and take them to college and drive away. I don't even know how I'm going to do that, but I will. I know that I will, and I know he'll be fine. But I also know I'm going to be shedding some tears for the next, well, first of all, I'm already doing it right now, but for the next several weeks as I get used to this kind of new reality, and that's okay. I think people often feel uncomfortable around grief or around, tears or around emotion, and it's like, I think it's beautiful. Like, I'm emotional because I love him so much. So yeah, I want to read this poem to you, which I can never get through without weeping, this Mary Oliver poem. And I also put it in the essay, but it's called In Blackwater Woods. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light. are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this. The fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Does me in. Does me in. And that's the part of the chapter. That's the chapter where I find myself again and again, in this season of life that I'm in. And the more that I can stay open to it, the better it goes. And the more that I can trust that I'm learning still, growing. We're never done. If we allow ourselves to keep opening, it's amazing. And to be curious. So I'm just curious right now, I'm just allowing myself to have my feelings and burst into tears when that's what's going to happen, which I did at brunch with, both of my kids sitting there, and thankfully they think it's sweet and not embarrassing, or annoying. So, it happened in the shower the other night. It happened when I was walking my dog yesterday. It's like, I'm just allowing the feelings to flow through me, and I'm trusting that on the other, as I've sort of enter into this season, and my daughter's really, I now know how fast 3 years go. They're just boom, she'll be going to college before I know it. Just trying to open to what is this season? How's this going to look? How's life going to look? What's going to happen? And I don't know. But, I'm going to have a lot more time for my own creative endeavors, and I'm feeling incredibly inspired. And so as much as there's a lot of grief and mourning for the days when my kids were so tiny and running around the house and hanging off of me, and they come barreling around the corner dressed as Jedis or, whatever, Elsa, whatever the mood was, those days were so incredible of just, it's kind of being living in this, it's magical, these kids are just, they're so great. They're so full of ideas and full of life. And as they've grown, there has not been a phase I haven't loved, of course there are times when they hit puberty where you're like, oh, this is not so fun. But really, honestly, I just love them. I love being their mom, and I love seeing who they're becoming and watching them really come into themselves, and seeing what interests them and what lights them up and what they're pursuing, and and how I could really, if I think back on it, I can see it all coming, and it's beautiful, and it's incredible, and I feel so thankful. And I also don't take this for granted either, and I think that's really what I wanted to say this week, is just, we come and we go, the waves roll in, the waves roll out, and the seasons come in, the seasons go out. Your children are tiny, your children are not tiny, and they're going to college. Just to try really hard not to miss it. And even though there's just so much in the world right now that will break your heart, at least let it break your heart open. Let it break your heart open. Stay open, because we need that in the world. We need people who burst into tears when things are heartbreaking. I think it's important. We have too many people they've gone numb because there's just so much pain, and I get it. I understand, but try to stay open. Thank you so much for just for being here, for spending some time with me, especially when I'm talking about how precious time is. I don't take it lightly when people are reading the things that I write and commenting, and you're listening to the podcast. I really don't take it lightly, and I just appreciate being in conversation with you. I'm easy to find if there's ever anything that you want to say, and just thank you. And I'm sending you a lot of love, and until next time.